Iran has just moved toward the nuclear step that Donald Trump spent years invoking, and Israel spent 17 years selling as an imminent threat. The Iranian parliament now has on its table a bill to abandon the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And this is not a hypothesis being floated. It is being debated with urgency, formally presented after a preliminary reading back in March, in the weeks after the February 28th attacks. If it passes, decades of international supervision over Iran's atomic program are erased at a stroke. For years, Washington cried wolf about an Iranian bomb that its own intelligence kept saying Tehran had not decided to build. Now, after months of bombardment, the wolf is finally at the door, and the bitter irony is who led it there. The story of how Iran arrived at this moment is the story of a cage, and of the man who removed its lock. Iran was contained, and not by American missiles. It was contained by 3 locks of its own acceptance. The nuclear deal signed in the Obama era, the IAEA inspectors who visited Iranian facilities more than those of almost any country on Earth, and something deeper, a religious edict. Iran is a theocratic state, and its supreme leader's fatwa held that nuclear weapons were forbidden, with one known exception in the doctrine's logic, unless the very existence of the Iranian state came under threat. Then, Donald Trump tore up the deal unilaterally. Then came February 28th. Then came the repeated promises, delivered from Washington's highest office, to erase the Iranian state from the map. A man who vows to wipe you out is a man handing you the religious, legal, and strategic justification to build the one weapon that guarantees he never can. Every bomb Trump dropped turned the key a little further, and the material for that weapon is not theoretical. The numbers were on the IAEA's own books before this crisis consumed them. The agency had recorded roughly 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% in Iran's hands. For scale, the fuel in a civilian power plant runs at 3 to 5% enrichment. Weapons grade is 90. And here is the detail the propaganda wars usually skip. The climb from 60 to 90 is the easiest stage of the entire enrichment process. By widely cited estimates, Iran's existing stockpile, further enriched, is enough for roughly 10 nuclear warheads, and that material sits in the tunnels of Isfahan, buried at depths that months of American and Israeli strikes have shown they cannot reliably destroy. 60% enriched, 10 warheads deep underground, and a parliament debating whether to walk out of the treaty that lets anyone watch. That is the hand Tehran is now showing. And it is showing it while pointing at a double standard the whole region can see. The IAEA audits the countries that submit to auditing. Israel is not one of them. It never signed the NPT. Its arsenal is never inspected, never questioned, never even officially acknowledged, and no one in Washington demands otherwise. Iran, by contrast, signed the treaty, accepted inspections, and got bombed anyway. That asymmetry is the entire Iranian argument in a single frame, and Tehran is now asking the question out loud. Why remain bound to a treaty that we honored, that Trump abandoned, and that bought us no protection whatsoever when the bombs came? The inspections did not stop the war. The compliance did not stop the war. In Tehran's reading, only one thing has ever stopped a war before it starts. And the history books back that reading with brutal consistency. There is an iron law in modern geopolitics, and every state on Earth has learned it. Nuclear powers do not get invaded. North Korea threatens its neighbors for decades and remains untouched. Pakistan holds the bomb, and instead of ultimatums, it receives invitations to mediate, while Afghanistan next door was invaded and occupied for 20 years. Libya gave up its program, and its leader died in a ditch. Iraq had no weapons at all and was dismantled as a state. The lesson is not subtle, and Iran did not need to be a genius to read it. Disarmament is what gets you destroyed, and deterrence is what gets you respected. Mutual assured destruction is a grim equation, but it is the only equation that has kept the great powers from each other's throats for 80 years. Tehran watched Washington teach that lesson to the world, one invaded country at a time. Now, Washington is watching Tehran apply it, and the diplomatic wreckage between them leaves nothing standing in the way. The last bridge burned quietly on August 18th, when the memorandum of understanding mediated by Pakistan expired with nothing achieved. The relationship is broken to a degree that makes a negotiated end look almost naive, and Iranian outlets like Tasnim and Fars are already framing the moment as one where Washington's provocations are forcing decisions Tehran would not otherwise take. Meanwhile, one provocative reading circulating among analysts sympathetic to Tehran holds that Iran is deliberately raising the temperature, daring an America with severely depleted interceptor stockpiles to fire its last salvos, absorbing the blow and standing when the shelves are empty. Whether or not that is the plan, the effect is the same. Iran is signaling that it no longer fears the next strike, and it wants the world asking whether Washington can afford to lose sleep over a bomb without firing a single shot. Remember what February 28th was supposedly for: preventing an Iranian nuclear weapon. 6 months later, the weapon is closer than it has ever been, and Iran may not be walking this road alone. The Russian shadow over this story is getting darker. The cooperation between Vladimir Putin and Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, inherited from his father and now accelerating, already includes a reported $25 billion Rosatom project to build new nuclear power plants in Iran, presented as peaceful reconstruction. But an intelligence report out of Ukraine goes much further, and honesty requires the caveat. Kyiv has every reason to paint Moscow darkly, and the report is unverified. Its details, though, are specific enough to take seriously. It describes a high-level barter, Russian nuclear technology, and materials flowing to Iran in exchange for the mass supply of Shahed drones that turned Russia's war in Ukraine. It names a Russian engineer officially assembling drone electronics whose entire career was built in plutonium facilities for nuclear warheads. It tracks Russian specialists in nuclear fuel container metallurgy relocating to Iran, Iranian engineers traveling to Russia, and matched with 2024 reports of Iranian scientists touring Russian nuclear plants, the puzzle pieces assemble into a picture Washington cannot ignore, especially after Ukrainian strikes reportedly began hitting Iranian vessels in the Caspian Sea, dragging that quiet corridor into the war. If Moscow has decided a nuclear Iran serves its interests, the timeline everyone debates in Washington may already be obsolete, which raises the question no one there wants to answer. What happens the day Tehran simply announces it is done? There is an old saying that fits. The young tell you what they are doing, the old tell you what they did, and the clever tell you nothing until it is finished. Iran has watched what announcements bring. It may well be that the parliament's debate is the public face of a decision already made, and that the world learns of Iranian warheads the way it learned of everyone else's, after the fact, when objecting is pointless. To be clear about where this channel stands, nuclear proliferation makes the world more dangerous, and no honest analyst celebrates it. But causality is not cheerleading. Iran signed the deal, accepted the inspections, held the fatwa, and got bombed. The day it declares a deliverable arsenal, the strikes end, the ultimatums end, and the invitations to negotiate begin, because that is the lesson Washington itself spent decades teaching. Trump promised to be tougher on Iran than anyone in history. He may instead be remembered as the man who talked about the wolf for so long that he finally led it to the door. The world is watching, and so far, no one is blinking. Subscribe to WLA for daily geopolitical analysis.